All right, everybody. Hey, we are glad to have our first speaker here join us on Note Camp 2022. This guy is a very knowledgeable real estate investor, got a big heart. Somebody that's involved with 4 real estate clubs throughout his state has definitely got a servant mindset and servant leadership mindset out there. So we're really excited to have Dombeck from Best REI Funding Group join us here on Note Camp 2020. So good morning, Derek.
Good morning, Scott.
How's the weather up there? You guys heat hot like everywhere else?
Well, it is. I live in Wisconsin, so usually summer hits us on a Tuesday, and that's about it. So it's been pretty nice lately, 70s and comfortable.
Don't getting me jealous on here with our 100-degree weather here down in Austin, Texas. Everything looks fried.
Yeah, I know. And I actually own some bucking bulls, Scott, and they live in Texas, so I'm very, very informed on what's going on down in your area.
Exactly. But you know what? We'll take our winners compared to you up there. How's that?
Yeah, there's reasons we travel a lot, especially in the winter.
Amen to that, brother. Well, hey man, I think you've got a presentation lined up to kind of go through some of the great things that you're doing up there and share with our audience, correct?
Yeah, I do.
Feel free if you want to share your screen or go from there. And then if you want to take questions throughout, or do you want to wait till the very end in a lot of cases?
So I really do prefer interaction along the way. Like I've got about 5 case studies. If we get through 1 or 2, I'm fine with that, as long as everybody's getting their questions answered. And if we get through all of them, we get through all of them. So
cool. Well, then what I'll do is I'll jump off here if you want to share your screen, and I'll monitor the chat roll and jump in and be here all along with you and keep the interaction going for everybody.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great. All right, so let's see here. I got to get this thing to go to slideshow. Come on.
There we go.
All right, so you can see that all right, Scott?
Yes, sir. It looks good.
Okay, so basically, Scott and I were chatting a while back when he asked me to speak with the audience today, and the thing that kind of hit was, well, what's going on in the market, and what do you do, because nobody can get their offers accepted, and there's so much competition out there. So I started telling them about some of the deals that I've done, and guys, these deals are all deals that I've done in the last market that's been really busy, right? And like these are 10-year-old deals. Scott, can you do me a favor?
Yes, sir. What? Yeah.
Are we able to see our audience at all?
Yeah, they should be able to. If they'll turn their cameras on, we can flip it to the view for sure. Let me do that here real fast.
And here's why. I hate talking to myself and staring at myself in a computer. Like, it's really, really boring for me. And I love interacting with people, but if I can see the audience, anybody that's willing to share their Sunday morning view, it definitely makes it easier for me too.
Yeah, hang on here. Let me show video. Let's see here. Guys, if you want to turn your cameras on so Derek can see you. I just put over to the different view on that. Let's see here. May not. Well, I'll be here. You can speak to me.
All right. I'm going to talk to you, Scott. I'm going to talk to you for an hour and a half.
There we go.
No, seriously, if anybody's ever had to present on Zoom and you don't have something else to look at but yourself, it's interesting. It's definitely more interesting. So
Nate says he's in his PJs cooking breakfast. He's not coming.
Well, you guys don't know what's on underneath this nice shirt, so below it, I should say. But so anyways, Scott and I were talking about, some of the stuff that we've been doing. And I said, well, the big thing for us is we like to give, our sellers multiple options and multiple offers. And, my background, I've been around since 2003 and I used to just use bank financing and all I ever could do was make, cash offers, not cash offers, financed offers. And ultimately, when I got through the downturn of 2007, which really sucked, and my wife and I got our butts kicked, we had to get creative. And what I realized was creative should have been the first thing we did, not the backup plan. To me, a bank should be the backup plan. or even a cash offer should be the backup plan, because there's so many other great ways to buy or control property. And that's important. It's not just about actually owning it. And you're going to see that in the first couple case studies that I do. It's all about control and helping people. 125%. I don't talk about my needs when I'm negotiating with a seller. All I'm focused on is how I can solve their real estate problem, and how do I do that makes sense for all of us. So this first one, Scott, that I'm going to jump into, these are all in proximity to where I live in Wisconsin. I do have a case study in Texas. I don't know if we'll get to it or not, but I did a deal in Texas a while back, which was interesting. But Scott, would you agree that that's not a bad looking house?
Yeah, exactly. That's a pretty cookie cutter, good looking little ranch house.
Yep.
Yeah.
3-bedroom, 2-bath, cookie cutter house. This actually sits on about 5 acres of land. This is about 20 minutes from where I live. Now, to give you all an idea, where I live, the median price points are about $150,000 to $200,000 for a cookie cutter house. When you add some acreage, any kind of extracurricular, things like this one had a dog kennel, actually like a professional dog kennel for multiple dogs. So this one, in an after repair value, would have been worth about $225,000. Except the challenge with this one was the guy had $132,000 worth of debt on 2 different notes, 2 different mortgages. And his name was Randy, so I'll just use his first name. It's easier. Randy wanted to retire from his job, and literally within days after retiring, he wanted to move from Wisconsin to South Dakota because he had met some gal there, and he was going to retire and go work on her ranch and just hang out. And his biggest challenge with this house, number one, he didn't want to deal with realtors. He didn't want to stick any money into the house that would come up on any kind of inspection reports from a home inspector. And he didn't want a bunch of people walking through his house, that he had to, and he was a bachelor at this point, or at least his girlfriend lived in a different state. So he was the only person living in this house. The wear and tear was minimal, and it wasn't cluttered by any means, but it was dated. Parts of it were updated. The kitchen had been updated within about 10 years, but the bathroom still looked like the 70s.
So you had a pink or an avocado green.
It had some wallpaper, had some issues. So when I looked at this and I said, well, if I did a full renovation on it, I'm going to spend about $40,000 to update this property to make it worth $225,000. That made my cash offer in the 120 range. And I'm going to use round numbers through this whole presentation because it's just, simple for me. So for Randy, $120,000, he would have to, bring about $10,000 or $12,000 to the table to close the deal. And he wasn't really excited about that, as most sellers aren't, right? But it still didn't solve his problem. He wanted to retire, he wanted to leave, and he didn't want to have to deal with realtors. And the other problem, if you look at the leaves on the trees, this was entering the fall of the year. So fairly large yard. It needs to be maintained. You can see the grass now, but there was about 4 inches of leaves all over that yard that had to be taken care of. And then shortly thereafter, we get this thing called snow, and that has to be taken care of. So picture this: if he would have just listed with a real estate agent and he moved to South Dakota, the real estate agent is not going to maintain the property. They may hire somebody to do snow removal. They may hire somebody to do lawn care, but this is about 10 miles from the city. So those services get harder and harder to find and more expensive. So I said to Randy, I said, okay, let's look at other possibilities. I could buy your property for cash. You said that doesn't work. We could do a joint venture where I bring the money to rehab the property. We agree upon a sale price for you right now, and then we split the proceeds when I sell it. By the way, Scott, I don't recommend that with civilians being non-investors. But it was actually a conversation that or a question he brought up. Otherwise, I would not have brought that one up.
Sure.
And I said, or I could put an option in place to purchase the property. And you can see on the screen for $150,000, which is what he told me is his walk away number. He would walk away for $150,000. And I said, the problem is I don't now want to stick $40,000 of rehab into a property that's going to be worth $225,000. And it's just too much risk. So I structured it in a way that was me trying to get as close to retail, I guess we'll call it wholesale pricing, as I could. And I explained it to Randy in the way that I'm going to make my profit off of what I sell your property for over and above the 150.
Mhm.
Are you okay with that? Because guys, he has to be okay with it, because he's going to know. I mean, I'm going to list this property on the MLS, and I'll tell you guys how in a little bit. But I'm going to list it on the MLS, and he's going to see what I'm selling it for. I'm not trying to hide anything from him at all.
Right.
It's full disclosure. So he agreed. He said, okay, I'll give you, I'll accept 150, but how long is this going to take? Now, when we're doing options, we as the investor, we want to try and get as long of a period of time as we can. And the seller usually wants as short of a period of time as we can. I typically want a year to 10 years on my deals at least, but he was not having it. He said, I don't really want this to go any more than it has to. And I said, Randy, if you were going to list it with a real estate agent, how long would that listing be? And the typical answer is 6 months. So I said, okay, if I can get this deal done within 6 months and different than a real estate agent, I'm going to stick my own money into it and do what I feel is necessary to make it sellable. And I'm going to take care of all the maintenance, the lawn care, snow removal if it gets to that point. Is that a better deal for him than listing it with a real estate agent? And he already knows what his price is going to be, his sales price. And if I fail, 6 months goes by, he has an improved property and I'm out whatever I spent out of pocket, but he's in a better position than he was the day I met him. And he liked that, he liked the fact that I was going to actually have some of my own money in it and skin in the game versus a realtor. Then we had this other portion of this, though, was how do I legally have the right to use the property and not to live in, but use being improve it, be inside of it, spend time there. Well, it's utilizing a lease, right? So we had to put a lease in place. So this just turns this into a lease option.
Right.
And it's early on Sunday morning, so I missed a step. I should have said earlier on, Scott. Creative deal structuring, in my definition, is stacking different strategies. Okay, so a lease is a strategy, an option is a strategy, purchasing subject to is a strategy, originating a note is a strategy. All these things are strategies, but that's not creative. Creative is using the different strategies, stacking them, and solving a problem. So I said to him, okay, great. I need a lease so that I have the right to use the property. And we need to agree upon, what do you want for a monthly rent for lease? And he was a shrewd negotiator, Scott. He came up with a dollar amount of $0. I mean, he really beat me up on it. He did. I did have to take over the utilities, which there was a propane tank because this was a rural property. And so that was already 75% full. So there's no expense there for me. And the electric bill, which averaged about $75 a month. I will tell you that a couple days later, he did come back and strong-armed me and said, I'd really like to be able to collect, at least enough to cover the real estate taxes, which was $225 a month. So I did I did settle on 225 rent for a 3-2 on 5 acres for 6 months, plus utilities, Scott.
That's a tough buy, man. I don't know if you'd be able to take care of that, man.
I know, right? Right. So that was the deal. And we put it together. Now I'll go through this, the rest of the numbers, and then I'm going to circle back to a couple things that I think are really key to protect yourself. So, I had a $225 a month lease. Randy, we signed the documents. Now the documents were a lease, an option, 2 separate documents, a power of attorney, and a mortgage. And the mortgage was given from Randy to me, securing my option. Okay. Scott, not a lot of people ever talk about this. And I don't know if anybody that you've ever had in your circle have talked about securing an option using a mortgage or a deed of trust, depending on your state. But I've had multiple conversations with attorneys, including Randy's attorney, who are clueless as to why we would want to do this. And part of this deal was Randy did want to have a conference call with his attorney. And his attorney adamantly said, Randy, I cannot advise you to pledge a mortgage to Derek to secure this option. And I said, not a problem. It's been great meeting you all. I'm not moving forward without it. So it's take it or leave it. And Randy hung up with the attorney and myself and called me within 3 minutes and said, let's do this deal. And the reason is, I love this line, Scott. When somebody wants to talk to their accountant or their attorney, you have no choice. You have to let them do it, because if you don't, they're going to call you, crooked.
Yep.
So when they come back, not if, but when they come back and say, my accountant said I shouldn't do this, my attorney said I shouldn't do this, I just say to them, great. Did your attorney give you any other solutions to your problem, or just tell you to say no to mine?
Right.
And that flips the script. And most of the time they'll still move forward.
Right.
The reason that I really strongly advise putting a mortgage in place, and I don't know if there's any questions in the chat on this or not, because usually I get questions at this point, but
there's some folks that like that. Oh, that sounds risky. You got some different comments in the chat roll here. I like that. That's creative, all that kind of stuff.
Okay, I'll tell them why this is not risky for us at all. This is super important for us. A mortgage is nothing more than a security instrument. And when I say mortgage, guys, it's the same as, deed of trust, depending on your state. I'm just going to use the term mortgage. So a mortgage secures a promise. It secures a pledge. Typically, it's used to secure a note, but it can also secure an option. It can secure a lease. It could secure a purchase contract. That almost would never happen, but it could. It's just saying if the agreement is breached, the property is collateral to take back to, compensate for the breach of the agreement. Why would a seller not want to follow through on our agreement to sell me the property for $150,000? Well, because I'm going to sell it for $200,000 and they're going to see this. And I'm open about it. I'm not hiding anything, but people sometimes get butthurt after the fact.
Yep.
And you have to protect yourself, because you're going to be sticking money into this property. You may have given them a large amount of money as an option consideration payment. So if Randy decided, hey, I don't want to sell you the house anymore, like we agreed in the option, and I did what every attorney tells you to do, which is record your option, which you can do, should do. I don't. Instead, I record the mortgage, and here's why. If you go and record the option on public record, what does everybody in the entire world get to see?
What you have it under a contract for, what you have that for. Yep.
And how long you
Exactly.
have to buy it. So if I recorded this option and people saw that I only had 6 months to buy it for $150, that could be a problem. The next thing is, if Randy sells this property to somebody else, and it typically goes through a title company or a closing attorney, and they do a title search, options have been missed in title searches because people that work in these offices aren't necessarily trained to look for options. They're trained to look for mortgages and deeds of trust, for sure. So if, and it's rare, I mean, it's a rare occasion, but if that option got missed and Randy was actually able to sell that property to somebody else, what are my odds of ever reversing that sale? Very slim. Now, I may be able to get a judgment. I may be able to get, go back on the insurance, the title insurance, all these things. I may get a monetary judgment. That does not mean I'm going to get paid. That just means I'm going to get a judgment. Okay. But I don't want the judgment. I don't want that money. I want the property. That was the whole agreement. I had a right to buy that property and do with it as I wish. Now we go to court and I'm filing a lawsuit against Randy, and we now end up in front of a judge, and the judge is looking at contract law, and the judge is reading and using his opinion on what we meant, what was the intention at the time that we signed the option. And it could be 180 degrees from what we really wanted as intentions. Doesn't matter. He's the judge. She's the judge, right? So we just end up in this coin toss situation by only recording an option if something goes bad. Let's flip to the other side of this coin. If I have a mortgage that Randy signed pledging his property as collateral, number one, I'm going to be in a junior position behind any lien holder ahead of me. So you always, before doing options, want to get a title search done for sure, so you know where your option is sitting in line. And I have no problem, having this property subject to 2 mortgages ahead of me. That would be no different than if I bought it subject to their mortgages. But you always want to know that. If we got into the situation of this lawsuit and I lose, I'm out, but I win, they may just give me back what I had taken out of my pocket, which is another good point. But if I had the mortgage, I could start a foreclosure action. Okay. And I could take this property away from Randy, and potentially Randy gets 0 proceeds if I do this. I've never had to even threaten this, by the way, so don't think that this is something that happens. But it's a great tool to say to Randy, if he's starting to get a little bit skittish, or you feel like something's going on, and here's how you may find out if something's going on. You get a random phone call. This did happen to me once. Random phone call from a title company or a bank asking you, what's your mortgage payoff? Well, that's interesting. Gee, what do I want my mortgage payoff to be? Because it can be anything I want. Now, Randy's either trying to sell it or refinance it. And do we want Randy to refinance it in excess of our purchase price? No, because then we go to exercise our option. If he goes and puts $200,000 worth of debt against a $150,000 sale, and he doesn't have the 50 grand when we want to exercise, now we have another issue, right? So we get that phone call from the title company or that new lender that's trying to put debt in place because we hold a mortgage. Again, if we had an option recorded, would we still get that same phone call? Maybe. But I guarantee you're getting that phone call if you've got a mortgage in place. Okay. Any questions on any of that at all, Scott? You're muted. You're muted, buddy.
My apology. Yeah, what's the terms of the mortgage that you put on there?
So the terms of the mortgage are, if Randy does not sell me the property per our agreement, I have a right to foreclose. That puts Randy in default. Okay. The the other mortgage clauses that you would see in a mortgage securing a note are not in this mortgage. This is a one-page mortgage. It's very,
Okay.
very simple.
Okay, cool. That's what some of the questions where we're like, is it the same terms as the underlying debt? And you're just basically putting a mortgage on here, basically the 150 there.
Right, because the underlying debt, they have other factors involved. Like if Randy doesn't pay the real estate taxes, they can foreclose. If he doesn't have insurance, they can foreclose. We don't have all those clauses, although we would want Randy to add us as an additional insured in his insurance policy as a mortgage, a lender, essentially.
Yep.
Not as your I should take that back, Scott. It would not be an additional insured. It would be another mortgage holder. We should go on his insurance policy because we stand to lose if the property burns to the ground. Okay. So any other questions on the mortgage aspect of this, Randy?
So let's see. That's okay. So you're putting a third lien on the house, basically, but this one allows him to foreclose if Randy won't close, David asks?
Yes, correct. For any reason, if he breaches the agreement to sell you the property within the agreed upon amount of time at the 150.
What's the time frame on the mortgage?
It's 6 months. It goes right along with the option.
Okay, cool.
And I will tell you that one of his attorney's biggest problems was he says, how do we guarantee that you're going to satisfy this mortgage? And I said, draft a satisfaction and keep it in your office, in your escrow account, and I'll sign it right now, pre-closing. And so as soon as done, and that still didn't satisfy the attorney, but it shut him up. I mean,
hey, we're gonna go ahead and sign that's like a deed of loan escrow, basically. What's wrong with that? We'll date it, sign it, and you just gotta exercise it when we're ready.
Now,
if we don't.
Scott, at the risk of upsetting somebody in your audience, I'm gonna say this anyways. Attorneys, accountants, professionals that have a lot of education do not like getting put in their place.
Amen to that, brother.
They think their shit doesn't stink.
Yep.
I have a PhD, a public high school diploma, and I set a lot of attorneys back on their heels, not because I'm better or smarter, but because I'm open to learning. And they're not open to learning from somebody that has, in their eyes, less education. So we just have to know I've studied a lot of this stuff. I don't need a law degree to study one piece of what works in our business. Right.
And I'm so glad you said that, because most, like you said, those individuals, they're book learned. They're not always real life learned. They don't have a diploma from the School of Hard Knocks or common sense. You know what I mean? And we've seen this with so many realtors. Their first thing, if they don't understand, is to say, well, that's got to be illegal. That's their thing. And no, there's nothing illegal about what we're doing. This is completely legit legal. It's in our favor. If you don't follow through with this, it's in our favor. We're doing this to protect ourselves.
Well, and the other rebuttal to an attorney in this particular scenario would be, why would Randy not pledge a mortgage? Is he not planning on following through with our agreement?
Right. Exactly.
And again, they don't know how to respond to that. Their job is to protect their client. I respect that 100%. But again, I'm solving Randy's problems. I'm meeting every one of his needs he told me he wanted. The attorney is not. The attorney's not giving Randy any solutions on how he can pick up and move within days to South Dakota to be with the woman he loves and not have to deal with the house.
That's right.
So again, we're just problem solving. We're not taking advantage of anybody's bad situations. I'm not taking advantage of Randy in any way, shape, or form. He's getting what he asked for. So the last piece of our documentation was the power of attorney. Now, this is a durable power of attorney for the property only. And you have to explain that to the seller, maybe more than once, and just say, this gives me the right to make decisions on your behalf for the property that are in your best interest, including selling the property. I can sign the deed. I can, talk to the banks. If there's debt, I can talk to the tax authority, real estate taxes, all the things that he would normally be able to do. Why? Because he's moving out of state, right? I gotta be able to have the control of this. And you're going to see in a second how this came into play. Now, one caveat I found out could bite you. You have got to be able to prove that that person is still alive, because your power of attorney dies with the death of the individual. So on the Texas deal, which we likely won't get to, that one could have bit me pretty hard, because that particular seller was supposedly leaving Texas and going back to help some family in Mexico. And I would likely have not have been able to prove that he was still alive if I was asked.
Mhm.
But so Randy, everything went good. He retired. We signed the documents. 6 days later, he moves out of the house, leaves for South Dakota, and we went in and spent $2,000 to fix what needed to be fixed. And that included, we had some seepage coming into the basement, which we took care of. If you look at the picture close enough, you can see rain gutters on the house. He had actually put those on 30 days prior to us buying this property. He had already solved 99% of his moisture issue in his basement. We just had to do a little bit of earthwork and do some pitching of the grade. And then we painted the entire basement, including the walls and the floor, because they were stained, water stained. Did a deep clean on the house, brought in professional carpet cleaners, things of that nature, did the yard work and landscaping, 5 days of labor, $2,000 total, including labor and material. And we listed this property on MLS for $200,000. We had 14 showings scheduled within the first 2 hours. We accepted the very first offer that we got because it was my real estate broker's friends that were looking for a house. And they gave me, we could have gotten a bidding war. I could have got another $10,000 for this house, but they were, we did it legit. It hit the MLS at 4 o'clock. Their showing was scheduled at 5. There literally was people parked at the end of the driveway for the next showing as we were signing a contract. But they were a great young couple, good financing, no inspections, everything you'd want. They actually were family friends of Randy and never knew that Randy would ever sell his house, right? Because they don't talk. We do off market deals. Nobody ever knew the house was for sale. Randy was actually very happy that this young couple ended up with the house. Even though he got a lot less for that property, he was tickled to death. But here's where the power of attorney comes into play, Scott. I signed the listing contract as POA for Randy. And Randy directly sold the property to this young couple. I did not exercise my option, nor did I double close, which is one way that you could do this. Okay. Instead, and I sold it as POA from Randy to this young couple. I got paid on the closing statement as a mortgage payoff. Okay. Where does this really come into play? If that couple is using FHA financing and there is title seasoning required, I could not double close. It would screw up their financing. Their underwriting would kick out their loan. The beauty with using a POA is when the underwriting's reading the title report, it shows Randy as the owner of record, not Derek.
Right.
So we don't have to explain anything. If I was double closing, they're going to have a contract, Derek selling it to them. And then the title work comes back showing some guy named Randy on title. Well, what's going on? All these things have to be explained to underwriting, and the loans get kicked out. So
because usually there's a 90-day seasoning on the flip rule with traditional financing in a lot of cases. So yeah,
right.
At minimum 90 days.
Yeah, especially with the government-backed type of loans.
Yep.
If it's a local credit union or bank, you can go in, explain the situation. They probably won't care. But so this really works well. I never owned the property. I never took deed to this property. We had $2,000 into it in 5 days. I net $36,000 on this property. And I never owned it. Now, it took them 28 more days to close.
Yeah.
So start to finish, 5 days on the market for one, plus another 28, whatever that adds up to, 36 odd days, whatever that is, $36,000 profit on a $2,000 out of pocket. What's that ROI? The answer is enough. It's enough.
Yeah.
Who cares, right? And we solved everybody's problems. Randy won, we won, his attorney lost, but we won. The end buyers won, my real estate broker friend won. Everybody got their profits, and we never owned the property. So,
and that's a
you got
great
any
way because you know, Randy didn't want, you said Randy didn't want to deal with realtors. He didn't really want to deal with it. He was more interested in love.
yeah.
And love won in this situation.
I love that he loves it too, or wanted love, right?
That's right. It motivated him to want to work with you versus having to go through all the other things. And you solved an issue. That's one of the greatest things. You got paid to solve an issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Does anybody got any questions in the chat on that one, Scott?
Let's see here. Nice. David asked the question, why don't all mortgages have a power of attorney too?
Well, the mortgage isn't the reason for the power of attorney. The reason for the power of attorney is because through the option phase, I need to be able to know that I can make decisions on his behalf. Even if I had never listed it and sold it, you know, as his POA, let's say I wanted to keep this property and turn it into a rental. That would change the option period. But let's say that I lease option this property and I was going to sublease it to a tenant. I may have to deal with code enforcement. I may have to deal with 100 different scenarios.
Yep.
Right. How do I know that Randy puts me on his insurance policy to protect me, as I mentioned earlier in this case study? Well, as POA, I can call his insurance company and make damn sure that I'm on that insurance policy. All these things are there to protect you. And oh, by the way, we're taking it off Randy's plate. Don't worry about Randy. I'll call your insurance guy. What's his name and number? Right? It's all about helping him, but protecting us along the way.
Yep.
You know,
well, that's the thing, is when people move on, it's really hard to get them to take action in a timely fashion because it's on their comfort level. And then it's the whole point. Well, I thought I turned this over to you to get everything down. Now I got to call this person and call this person and do this stuff. I don't want to do that. I want to go out and get some loving. Call me McLovin.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In South Dakota, of all places. So, that's that one. I can jump to the next one if everybody's got their questions answered, Scott.
Yeah, I think so. Let's go ahead. Yeah, let's go down to deal number 2.
All right. So this is a cute little house. So this city, to give you some perspective, there's about 100,000 population in this city. A lot of these 40s and 50s and 60s homes that were built, you know, around the wartime, and a lot of them that are you know, have been halfway updated, but they still need some love. And these turn into rental properties, very common. So this gentleman, he was 70 years old. He had bought this property, and he bought it for $55,000 6 years prior to us doing this deal. I started this deal about, 2.5 years ago is when I did this deal. So I made a 3-tiered offer, and the first offer was $34,000 cash. The second offer was $55,000 at 5% interest, amortized over 20 years. And the third offer was $70,000, 0 interest, payments of $350. Okay. Why is that important? He was charging not enough rent to start with, but his cash flow every month, now this was free and clear, but his cash flow was about $275 a month after his taxes, insurance. By the way, that's not including maintenance or anything else, you know, actual expenses. In his mind, he was cash flowing $275. To the rest of us, we all know better. He wasn't hardly cash flowing anything because he was self-managing and had to deal with, you know, the maintenance items. He had the same tenant for the entire 6 years, which is why he didn't want to raise rents. He's charging $650 for rent for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house that needed a $10,000 renovation. Okay. So when we stepped into this, I was looking at this saying, if I stick 10 grand in this house, it'll be worth about 105. Okay. Not a bad deal. I mean, again, in this neighborhood, 1-car garage, that should rent for about $1,000 a month. So if I was into it for 70 to 80, I'd be okay with that. But the cash offer is if I'm going to flip it, right? So $34,000 cash, and I'm going to stick 10 grand into it. Typically, I would probably do that deal and stick 20 grand into it, because if I was going to do a full flip, I'm going to do a lot more to it. But I'm looking at this as I want to hold this property and rent it out. So I'm talking with him, and he says, well, I really need to run this past my son-in-law, who is a financial advisor. I thought, oh, here we go. This is going to be great. And as you can imagine, financial advisor who only deals with stocks and mutual funds, has no clue about real estate, is telling him, absolutely, you should not do this deal with 0 interest. Why would you ever do that? That's crazy. And I said to him, I said, okay, well, for me, I am happy with any one of these 3 offers because the net result is about the same. But for you, $70,000 at 0% interest keeps more money in your pocket because of Uncle Sam and how things are taxed. Now, I never give anybody tax advice, and I'm not going to give your listeners tax advice. You know, and again, I have a PhD. What do I know about taxes? But I know that even if he got hit with imputed interest, he's still going to be at a much better scenario with the $70,000, and it raises my my basis in the property as well when I get ready to sell the property, which I like. I lose a mortgage interest deduction because there's no interest, but I gain a higher tax basis when I sell the property. If I sell it short term or long term, that's still important to me. Okay. So ultimately, my payments in those couple offers were going to be in the 325 to 350 range. He puts more money in his pocket each month now with 0 hassles of management. And that's really all his goal was. He did not want a lump sum of money. He wanted the monthly revenue, and he was concerned about what happens if he dies. And he said, okay, I don't love putting balloons in any of my structures if I don't have to, but he did want a 3-year balloon payment. And Scott, what do you think about balloons? I mean, you're the note guy. What do you feel about balloons? You're still muted.
They don't bother me as long as they're far enough out. And they're usually pretty enough to renegotiate if I need to extend a year or 2. But usually I do a balloon 5 to 10 years, and I'm usually going to be out of the deal by that point, or have it restructured or do some other things. But that's what I like to do in there. I mean, you know, since we're buying a lot, you know, owner financing stuff, that's what I want. But you know, they don't bother me at all. But you know, everybody's a little bit different on what they want to do and what their goals are long term for an asset. You know what I mean?
So you said that you could renegotiate them and get them extended, possibly, right?
Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah, all the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
we'll come and say, hey, you know, like we had to come and say, yeah, hey, can I renegotiate, send this out if I pay a point, or we adjust the terms a little bit. You know, it's pretty easy to do.
So it's almost like we rehearsed this, but we didn't. Okay. Because I want to structure that extension from the get-go, right from the jump. And here's how you do it. I just said to him, I said, okay, I understand that and agree to a 3-year balloon. I got no problem with that. My goal is to put a person in here on a rent to own or a lease option, actually more than a rent to own, lease option. And my lease options are structured to be 1 to 2 year deals. But sometimes those fall apart and I got to start over with a new lease option. and I'm saying this to the seller, right? And I said, if I got to that 3-year window and it's the window's closed, it's time to pay the balloon, and there's something beyond my control. We could be in the middle of a war. We could be, have an election cycle that doesn't go well. Always blame it on things beyond your control, right? Yeah. We could have COVID. This was before COVID, actually. So this would have been several months before COVID is when I did this purchase. And I said, in that event, something happens, I can't pay you off. Do you want the house back? And 99.9% of the time, their answer will be no. There is a rare occasion they will say yes, but as long as they say no, it's super easy to get an extension, because you just say to them, listen, Mr. Seller, we're in really good communication right now. We know each other. We like each other. We trust each other. We have to grow that trust over time as I make payments to you. But if I live up to my end of the agreement, would you have any reason to believe that I'm not going to pay you longer term? Can we not figure out an extension right now where I give you X, and it might be, I'll give you $5,000 towards it all comes off the principal. And then I get another 3 years, or I get another 5 years, or whatever. So you can take, almost without fail, you can take these balloon deals from the get-go and get twice the amount of time that they wanted for a balloon. Almost without fail. You just got to ask. Yeah. So that's exactly what we did. He's 70, 71 at the time. Worried about not being around when the balloon hit, or just want to make sure his wife was taken care of if he did pass away. So yeah, let's solve their problem, but let's look out for what we need too. So we ended up doing that. The $70,000 was zero down, monthly payments of $350. Actually ended up with a 5-year balloon and a 3-year extension on this one, and zero interest. Okay, so at $350 a month, we're getting $350 a month principal reduction. So once we have this thing turned over and a tenant in there, and we're going to increase our rents, even if we were at a break-even cash flow on the front end, which, by the way, I would never do, but if we're legit cash flowing $350 a month from the get-go on the principal reduction alone. Okay. So I brought in a financial friend who, because I don't like tying up a lot of my own money in any deal. I kind of have a religion against it, actually. I have a religion against paying retail, and I have a religion against using my own cash for very long periods of time. Okay.
Same, and I suffer from the same thing.
Yeah. It's definitely something that we could start a club. So I have a financial friend, and I'm very nosy with all of my financial friends. I like to know what they have and what they're seeking. So I knew she had a small IRA, and I had actually used it before and gotten her an extremely nice rate of return. So she wanted to place it into another deal. Now, guys, I run a lending company. So I run a hard money lending company. So it's not out of the question for us to be, working with millions of dollars a month in hard money loans, but those are all short term. And I don't want to go to those investors and say, hey, I want to take your money and put it into this long-term deal, because I want to use their money for all of our short-term loans. But my financial friends that have $20,000 in IRA, I don't want to put them into our hard money lending pool of funds because it's too small of a dollar amount, right? But I still want to make them great returns. So I said to her, I said, okay, here's the deal. I want to use $10,000 of your IRA in exchange for 25% of the future equity of this property at the time I sell. And that time is up to me. It could be a year. It could be 10 years. It could be 20 years. And she said, absolutely, let's do that. That is a really generous gift to her. Why would I do such a thing? Because we're financial friends, and we're trying to help each other grow our retirement accounts.
Yep.
You know, we pass deals back and forth with our financial friends. We do things for each other. And I'm being able to get into that deal with zero cash out of my pocket. You look on a screen, you'll see the renovations went over. And it went over because we ultimately had, once we'd started a little bit of demo in there, we had to do some other things. And, you know, hey, it happens, right? So I actually did have $6,115 out of our pocket to put in this deal. We put a lease option tenant into the property, and they gave us $5,000 up front for their option, which means I now had $1,115 into this deal, because that money doesn't go to my financial friend. That financial friend gets 25% of the equity. They do not share in the cash flow. Very important point. Okay. The $5,000 on the front end is considered cash flow. It does go towards the purchase price as long as the option is exercised, but it does not go towards the purchase price if they fail. So then it becomes rent. Okay. So this family moves in. The guy was a veteran. I have him working with my mortgage broker ahead of time before we sign the lease option, because I like to know what their challenges are. What do we got to do to get them to qualify for a loan? I set up 1 year options with the right to extend for a second year at my sole discretion, not theirs. They have to pay the rent. They have to take care of the property as if they owned it, which means they maintain everything. I don't care if it's a furnace, an AC, whatever it is their responsibility as if they own it within our agreement. So fast forward, I mean, they signed this contract in November, started paying $9.95 a month for their rent, and COVID hits 4 months later. Job losses, they start falling behind. It got ugly, and I absolutely could have booted them out. Right. We had that time. A lot of us had that period of time to try and make decisions. What do we do? What's best for us? The key there was they were taking care of the property. You know, if I walked through and they weren't taking care of the property and they weren't paying their rent on time, game over. But they were taking care of the property. They were struggling. They were doing what they could. They were robbing from Peter to pay Paul, getting friends, getting money from family, doing whatever they could. So I kept working with them. They got through year one, 2020, 2021. Now we're into year number 2. Now in my options, I structure a tiered purchase price. The purchase price is set in stone, but it goes up in year 2 because I don't want people to gain the equity while they're not performing and exercising their option. I want them to be motivated to do whatever they got to do to fix their credit or whatever their challenges are in year 1 and get closed, exercise their option and closed within 365 days. If it goes 366 days and they close, their price just went up to, in this case, went from $114,900 in year 1 was their purchase price to $118,347 in year 2. Okay, which happened to be 2021.
You basing that question? Are you basing it off of pulling comps, or it's a percentage increase in the contract? How does that work for you, Derek?
Percentage increase in the contract usually, which in this particular case, I was way off on appreciation, right? Like, which was a benefit to them.
Right.
I'll usually be a 3 to 4% bump in year 2, which is just cost of living increases.
Yep.
But I want to make sure that when I'm doing these deals, I'm not setting them up for failure. That $115,000 initial price, that was off comps. That I know the property will appraise out.
Yep.
I know they'll be able to get the loan at that number without any issues. So they go into year 2, it's 2021. They're still having some financial struggles. Not some, they're having a lot of financial struggles, but they've gotten current with me. Now it's just a matter of getting their credit fixed so that they can actually qualify for a loan. And November of 2021 came, and it got to a point where, they're working with my mortgage broker. So I'm in communication. I'm not getting this third party from them saying, yep, everything's roses. I'm getting it from my broker saying, okay, what do we really need for them to close? And he said, I need at least 2 more months. I said, okay. So if that's the case, I'll still honor that purchase price if you can get them closed in 2 more months. He couldn't get them closed, and they said, well, we have a friend he was in the military with that is willing to co-sign. Will that work? And his friend lives in Hawaii, he's stationed in Hawaii currently, house is in Wisconsin, and this guy is willing to co-sign. I'm looking at him like, you're an idiot, but who am I to judge? So it still wouldn't work. The wife's credit had gotten too bad, it wouldn't work. And I said, okay, well, your options expired, and I'm sorry, but you have to leave. This property is now worth $135 because of the market we've had, right? And now we're in spring of 2022, this past spring, and it's appraised value at $135. So that financial friend in Hawaii was willing to buy the house outright and then do a side deal with them to lease it to them. I don't know what the terms of their agreement are, but I got on the phone with this gentleman in Hawaii, and I said, listen, the property's worth $135. Here's the steps I would suggest you take to protect yourself, friend or no friend, you still have to protect yourself. But I'm not selling it to you for $118,000. Because why? I could just kick them out, go in, freshen up the property, and sell for $135. So I said, what's fair and what makes sense? And we agreed upon $123,600. He still had some equity. And remember, the $5,000 that I had gotten as option consideration, which would have gone towards the purchase price, is now that's the different buyer. So I pocketed that $5,000, did not go towards the purchase price, and then I sold it for $123,600. So if I really added those numbers up, I got $128,600. But now I didn't have to go back in and stick any kind of money into the property again. So everybody won. Okay. How did the numbers come out on this? Well, $123,600. If you look at my profit over 2.5 year period of time, this is going to be rents and the sale price after I paid my financial friend. Okay. So how is that as far as a rate of return, Scott, on $6,115 over a 2.5 period of time? Yeah, you're muted. You're muted, Scott, but I'm reading your lips.
That's enough.
It's enough, right?
Yep.
I mean, that's the whole point of these deals, but we structured and stacked a lot of different strategies. If we go back, we had a free and clear property with a seller finance note and mortgage. Then we put together a contract with our financial friend, which that was a participating note. Then we did a lease and an option with our end buyer, who didn't end up being our end buyer. And then finally the purchase and sale contract with the actual buyer, all through this, and everybody came out a winner.
Yep.
Right?
Amen to that.
Consequently, my financial friend on this deal, her $10,000 IRA, she got a check back for just over $21,000,
right,
in a 2.5 year period of time. So pretty good rate of return in her IRA.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, David asked that question. So when Derek says that he paid his financier 25% equity at closing, he really means that she got 25% of the free and clear profit, right?
Yes, she got 25% of the net, not including the cash flow from the rents over that 2.5 years.
Mm-hmm. And the original seller is happy now. He got his he got a little bit of cash flow along the way. I think it was reducing the debt roughly about 12 grand a year. So if you were into it for 2.5 years, you owed what, around $40,000, $45,000 on this at the end of closing.
Right. And that's the part that my financial friend does get. She gets 25% of that principal reduction every month in equity.
Yep.
So it's very appealing to her.
Yep. Awesome. Good stuff. That's a great deal. Who wouldn't do those? I mean, that's the beautiful thing. You do those all day long. There's, all day long, baby, and twice on Sunday.
And especially now, as the markets are starting to get a little bit more volatile, like you could do this in any market. That's why I'm talking about case studies I've done in the last couple of years when it's been really hot. But guys, when the market shifts, you can do this even more and more and more. That's the whole point of this. And
the thing too is, you look at what's going on, not just with prices going up, but you've got a lot of baby boomers who have bought real estate. They don't want to be in the real estate business anymore. They don't want to be in the rental business. They want to get out. They've got equity, or they've got free and clear property. They want to get out. And you structure this in a way where they wouldn't take an immediate tax hit. They delayed it over time. For them, it's a benefit for them because now they don't have to deal with it. It's an opportunity for you to come into and make things work. And you help folks get into a house that they couldn't qualify for and almost didn't qualify for without their financial friend. But it's also, it's still a win for them, because if you sold it at the 123, get the guy in Hawaii, if he's a VA loan, he's got some little bit of equity there. You really helped multiple people along the process. Right. And when I'm doing this in front of a live audience and people are raising their hands and asking questions, most of the time people will ask this question, Scott: how do you get the seller to tell you what they need? Right? Because this is the biggest problem with real estate investors in general. And again, maybe I'll offend some of your audience, but I don't care. Too many people are lazy. Yes. And they just want to push the easy button, and they want cash to flow like falling rain. The reality is you've got to learn how to talk to people, and you've got to learn how to solve their problems. And you can't solve their problems if you don't know what their problem is. Yep. When I got my ass kicked in 2007, when the market shifted, I was that distressed seller that had all these problems. So I can relate a lot to people that are having struggles. This gentleman didn't have a financial struggle. He had a struggle with management. He didn't want the joys of management anymore. So how do we really find that out? We have to ask questions. We have got to get on a personal level with the sellers. You can't do that with a MLS listed property that you're just making a written offer through a realtor. It's virtually impossible. It can happen, but it's very rare. Okay. So you just have to get good at solving people's problems, but you got to know what they are. Typically I do a little elevator pitch. Usually this is over the phone. And I do it within the first 2 minutes of every interaction I have with a seller. And it goes something like this, Scott. Scott, we buy houses in several different ways. All cash is not a problem, but that's typically going to be our lowest offer. If that doesn't meet your needs, then we can look at other possibilities. Like we can take over your debt payments if you still have debt. If you don't, we could make payments to you over time, or we could even lease your property and buy it at a future date. That usually works with like landlords that are trying to offset some taxes or something like that. I tell you all this, Scott, just so you know, there's multiple ways we can help you, but I may have to ask you some questions that most people wouldn't. Is that okay? And elevator pitch. Okay. Now, by doing it and setting it up that way, any question I ask you moving forward, you're not going to be offended with, and you're going to likely answer. Now, of course, there's always going to be some people out there that you got to caress a little bit more, right? But I've gotten their permission to ask them anything I want. And that's why it's so important to try and do whatever's natural for you, so it doesn't sound like a script, but whatever's natural for you to get that point across. That's how you get people to open up about their needs, and you'll solve their needs. So gotta ask questions. I mean, that's the power. The people that make the most amount of money invest are the ones that ask the most amount of questions. Yeah, for sure. So that was a pretty good deal. Yep.
Was there any questions in the chat on that one at all?
No, they just like the great elevator pitch. And David asks, is there any downside to this type of deal for you, Derek?
Absolutely. If the markets crash and your tenants can't get financing, you got to be prepared. If you're the one holding the option, if I was in a tenant's shoes and the markets went down and now I can't get financing and I put up $5, $10, $15, $20,000, do I stand to lose that money? Yes. Us as landlords, COVID moratorium on rents, could that have destroyed? Did it destroy a lot of landlords? Absolutely. There's always risk. You got to weigh out what you're willing to take on. In this case, he went month after month with giving me partial rents and not the $1,000 that he owed me. We had to make a decision. Do we keep him? Do we not? So there's risk, but I like my odds when I'm buying a property for $50,000 to $200,000 versus if I was buying a property for $500,000 to $2 million.
Exactly. Yeah.
I live in the Midwest. We can still cash flow our properties and be okay. I bought one on Friday for $37,000 and it needs a $60,000 renovation, but it's gonna be worth $160 when it's done. If it doesn't sell, I like my odds, right? Yeah. I'm into it for under $100,000. Will I be okay? Yeah. So it's just those types of deals that you gotta get used to and know your threshold.
Awesome. So,
cool. So this one, Scott, what do we got for time?
You're good. We've got roughly 25 minutes for the next speaker supposed to start. So you're golden.
Okay, sweet. So I'm going to run through this one. Now, this is not some really dramatically awesome deal from a financial standpoint of profit, but I love this deal from the perspective of helping people. Okay. This little house is about 300 yards from a really nice lake. Doesn't have a basement, has a crawl space. In Wisconsin, basements are pretty important. Most people expect one. So it does devalue a property if you don't have it. But this little 2-bedroom house was super important to a couple people that were brought to me by a real estate agent that didn't know how to solve their problem. Okay. Pam and Justin are their names. Pam's dad, 80-ish, 82. He's beyond the point where he can do anything for himself. Really needed 24-hour care. Pam, this is the house Pam grew up in. She moved back in with her father and to take care of him. And now they're trying to get their father into a nursing home and on Medicaid. The problem with that is Medicaid looks at your assets and they want you to liquidate your assets so that they can use them. And I guess that's fair. We won't get into a political debate, but that's what was happening. And this house has been in their family. I mean, she grew up in this house, so it's been in this family since the 70s. And the way Medicaid works and all of these government programs essentially is he can't sell the property to a family member for less than retail value. She can't qualify for a loan because of their income and other challenges at retail value. So this property is worth $125,000 as it sits. He owed $45,000 on a mortgage. Her dad owed $45,000 on a mortgage. And there's 2 other junior liens. They made some bad decisions and overpaid to have this handicap accessible shower put in and got price gouged beyond belief. Windows price gouged. So there's $22,000 worth of payments or debt that they're making payments on. So all said and done, about $67,000 worth of debt and property valued at 125, 130-ish, right? So I said to Pam, I said, okay, if I buy your dad's property subject to the debt, and I let you guys lease the property from me with an option to purchase, does that solve your problem? And she said, well, yeah, but how does that work with dad? Because, if he goes into the nursing home and the loan is still out there, isn't that going to be a problem? I said, no, because he doesn't have the deed anymore. If I leased the property from your dad and he still had a deed, that would be a problem. If I buy the property subject to the mortgage, he doesn't own it anymore. We have a closing statement. You can prove to the nursing home, you can prove the Medicaid, it's sold. And she said, yeah, but how can you buy it for $45,000 first mortgage and the other? Because in reality, I actually bought it for the $45,000 and they're still paying on those other two liens. I'm taking that risk because it doesn't matter for the story, but the closing statement showed a $45,000 sale price. And she said, well, how can it be bought for such a dollar amount below fair market value? And I said, well, there's a very good chance that it's going to get questioned. And so I need to be able to show why I did this. I need to be able to show, my track record in my company that we always buy property below value. We renovate them and we increase their value. And I said, our worst case scenario is that they get pissed, but there's no money for them to get. There really isn't. I mean, because this did end up ultimately happening, and I'll tell you the end of the story before I tell you the middle. They put dad into a nursing home. 2 months went by, and the nursing home started to question, nursing home being the front person for Medicaid.
Right.
So Medicaid was questioning the nursing home was questioning them. How did this property sell so far below value? And we had taken pictures of the inside, because the inside is dated and it needs a lot of work to update it. It doesn't need a lot of work to live in. It's perfectly fine, but it's wallpapering and it's looks old. It was an 82-year-old man's house. To him, it looks like fine, but to us, anyone that would want to buy it now, it's not updated. So we just documented it. We documented the fact that there was a $9,000 shower put in, and we documented that there was $13,000 worth of windows put in. And then I had a real estate, friend of mine, broker, run comps. Now I carry a broker's license. I could run comps, but I need a third party. So we ran comps, and I said, okay, what are the lowest comps in that area? Not the highest. What are the lowest? Backed out our renovation costs, showed them my formula for what I do every day on how I purchase properties and why it would sell for that. And the whole thing went away. And the reason the whole thing went away is because the nursing home doesn't care. They just need something to put in the file.
Yep.
The person on the Medicaid side of the phone call doesn't care. They just need to show they did their job. They're just pushing paper. So when they had something from a licensed real estate broker in the state of Wisconsin saying, this is the valuation of these comps in this neighborhood, here is what it would cost, or the renovation cost to take it up to this current value, whatever, right? So I have done this so many times that it doesn't even make me nervous anymore, because ultimately I know they're just trying to show that they did their job and there's going to be no follow through after that. So it all worked out on that regard. But Scott, if you bought this property, $45,000 first mortgage, subject to a couple, $22,000 in debt, and it's worth $125, what do you think the resale on the option back to Pam and Justin should be?
If you're solving an issue that can't be solved, I would say at least 100, if not more.
100 grand purchase price?
At least, yeah.
Okay. So, and there is no wrong answer. This is the cool part of helping people and solving people's problems, because you get to lead with your heart, right? Mm-hmm. I told Pam and Justin, I don't do a deal that I can't make 20 grand on minimum. So I said, I want to make $20,000 over my actual expense, including all closing costs, anything I ever take out of my pocket in regards to this house in Delavan, that plus 20 grand. And I want to make $200 a month on your rent. So I'm taking over the mortgage. You know what the mortgage payment is because you've been making it for years. Add $200 to that. If the escrow goes up because of taxes or insurance, your rent goes up proportionally, you know, and that's the deal we're doing. And they're still there. We did this deal last year. Their 1 year came up in April 31st. And they're working with my mortgage lender. They're still having some challenges getting a mortgage. So I said, no problem. We've already got it documented what your purchase price is for year 2. It goes up by $2,000. Pretty fair deal.
Yeah.
This house, by the time they close on it by let's call it next spring, this house is worth 140 all day long, maybe 150. Right. So I love this story mostly because I get to give back. And they are doing, like, the furnace went out. They called me in June. The furnace went out. They had to spend $5,700. They don't have an extra $5,700, but they found it. I own the house. They put a $5,700 expense into my house. I could have kicked them out, right? In April, their 1 year came up. I could have said, nah, I don't feel like extending because the market is so hot. Right? I could have kicked them out of their family home. That's not fun. Nor do I want to be that guy. And I don't have to be. I'm still going to make a profit. Right? So that's why I love this deal. It's not creative. We didn't stack 15 structures, right? Or 15 strategies for the deal structure. It was pretty basic, a sub 2 and then a lease option. But I love the fact that we get to help people by being creative. Nobody else knew how to help this family. This real estate agent had no clue how to help this family. And I feel like that's super important.
It is, yeah.
You know, so you got any questions on that one at all?
Yeah, we asked, let's see here. David asked the question was Derek able to get them to sign over the title at the beginning of the deal?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
That's you mentioned he had to do that because otherwise Medicare would have seen that the father's name was still on top. It was still sitting out there and still owned it technically. And that's why he was able to sign it over and do the deed transfer. So, yeah.
Scott, does this group understand sub 2 very much? Have you had much of that discussion?
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, we talked. We had Chris Prefontaine on yesterday talking about subject 2 as well. Montrese,
awesome.
How do you find your houses? This one came from a realtor, but how are you finding your houses?
Every off-market marketing channel you can think of. So we do direct mail, Google AdWords campaigns, social media marketing, the gamut, and we do some more than others, and it'll change, will fluctuate. But yeah, I don't buy anything. I shouldn't say I never buy off the MLS, but it's very rare, at least right now.
Sure. Cool. You want to share the numbers on this one and what exactly it came out to on this one, Derek?
Like I said, it hasn't sold. So
okay.
So I'm gonna be at question mark on profit. I keep forgetting to flip through the slide. So I'm just talking. It's Sunday morning, guys. Sunday morning.
Exactly. Can I ask what the option is? What's their option on it right now? Do you know that? Or do you want to share?
It was at about $80,000 when we started. But again, it's going to be when they exercise their option, we have to fill out a purchase contract.
Yeah.
At that time is when we'll figure out what I'm out of pocket exactly and add $22,000 at this point.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah. So it was a fun deal.
Yeah. Keeping people, I mean, that's the thing. You help solve an issue. The reason the realtor couldn't do it because they're not creative enough a lot of times, and their whole thing is sell the property. Well, where does the family go? They don't want to go. They want to stay in their house. They've put this work into that works well for dad, and that's doing a lease back. Yeah, that's an option. I mean, that's right. We don't, you can't do lease options here in Texas beyond 180 days, but that doesn't mean you can't. All right, when you want to sell it, let's, just you're not taking a deposit. Let's offer to sell it, or we'll sell it to market value, or 85% of market value whenever you get around to it in a lot of cases.
So let me ask you this question, because I did do a deal in Texas, and I lease optioned it. I was the one that got the lease and the option. But when I did my research, can you or can you not lease option to a business?
Sure, all day long.
Okay.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. All day long. Okay. Yes. To LLCs, the businesses. Yes. Of course you can do that. See, owner occupant.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, that you can't do. But yeah,
So do they have loopholes? You know, if your owner occupant happened to start an LLC, like a single member LLC, can you do, or is anybody trying that at all? Again, I'm just thinking outside.
That's where I go. If the owner started the LLC, well, then it's a hard time if they want to get traditional financing a lot of times. You know,
Okay.
if the LLC is not seasoned and they don't have the assets and the credit, stuff like that.
So
and
it would have to be a longer term lease option with all that in mind that they're
Yeah.
gonna, yep. Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, you can buy on a lease option all day long here as an investor. I think it's a great way to do it in a lot of cases, especially with the appreciating values of things going on. But yeah, it's no owner occupants or homestead, basically. It's a really difficult thing here.
Right. Well, the last thing I'll point out on this one, Scott, is usually when I buy sub two, I'm buying in a trust. I usually name my trust after the last name of the individual I buy it from. So it'd be their last name, family trust. But because this was a Medicaid scenario, I didn't want to do that.
Yep.
In this case, I just named it 313 First Street Trust, and no problems whatsoever with it. So
yeah, it's pretty common, either off the name or the street address in a lot of cases, for sure.
right. Man, how much? I don't.
We got 13 minutes next speaker. If you want to squeeze one in.
I don't know that I'm going to be able to, but I'm going to show you this real quick. I'm just going to click through these slides for you guys. This is a lake house I optioned last year for $160,000, 1 year option, monthly rent of $600 for a lake house. Divorce situation. They both moved out, both went into their own apartments, and ultimately they now had 2 rents plus $1,100 mortgage. And this house, the lake frontage and the yard and everything was awesome. The house itself was weird as hell. If you look at the picture, on the left-hand side was a cabin, and then on the right-hand side where you see that goofy roof line, they brought in a modular prefab and attached it to the cabin. Weirdest thing that you've ever seen. But we went into this on the option, $600 a month rent. We came in and put in $7,000 renovation over 30 days. Very similar to what we did with Randy's deal.
Yeah.
Just made it where it could pass for financing, cleaned up the landscaping, accepted an offer at 200 grand, and we profited $22,000 plus a hot tub and a 6-month-old side-by-side stainless refrigerator that are
Very nice.
both in my house as we speak. So that was a fun one. Dickinson, Texas, not a bad house, right? I wish I had time to tell this whole story because this guy absolutely lied to me and found out he was in jail, flew down to Texas, had to go to jail and get his signatures on stuff. He was allegedly going to go to Mexico to help a family friend. In fact, he was running from a sexual assault of a minor charge. And this all happened right as COVID was hitting. So I can't go through all the numbers, but long story short, I profited 11 grand and I was happy I didn't lose my ass on this deal because it could have went really sideways. But absolutely, you can do a deal from anywhere. You know, there's these things called airplanes, so you can fly around.
Well, I've had to deal. I've sent signers, notaries and reps into jail, into prison to have people sign off, especially when we buy the debt of having them deed the property over and putting you $500 in their commissary as cash or keys deed in lieu.
Yep.
You've got your information. Leave your information up there for a second. But we had a few folks that wanted to ask questions. Can you talk a bit more about the trust on the deal there that you mentioned beforehand? You put things in a trust.
I guess in what regard? I mean, we use trust for the anonymity, but we use trust primarily when we buy subject to, so that we don't trip the due on sale clause in their loan. And that's why we would name the property after their last name, family trust. Where I live in Wisconsin, trusts are not hardly used at all. Other parts of the country, they're very, very commonplace. So our attorneys, again, I'm not bashing on attorneys, but it's easy to do. Our attorneys don't spend much time on learning trusts. And if you ask an attorney here to do one for you, they're extremely expensive. And once you know how to use them, I mean, we draft our own trusts at this point. We don't need an attorney every time because we're just changing the address and the dates and trustees, and stays the same. So is there any other questions on that?
No, but that's the thing that makes sense, is you're doing that to avoid the due on sale clause and make it very simple in the transfers. It looks something very similar to the borrower for image wise, stuff like that. I mean, have you had any banks call notes to? As long as they're getting paid. Yeah, I mean, as long as they're getting paid most of the time. I mean, I'm being in the lending side. If somebody wants to assign a property to somebody, as long as they're paying the mortgage, I don't give a rat's ass. I'm happy being the bank.
Yep. We had one time, the very first sub two we ever did, which we were green. We didn't know what we were doing. We tried closing it in an LLC, and the insurance is what tripped it up.
Yeah.
So we had to go back and redo that, but no, never had it happen after that. And we were able to shift that one around and solve it. So Scott, do you mind if I mention my conference?
No, I do. Please do. I want you to, Derek. Definitely.
So real quick for your audience, I'm drafting a book. Now, my primary business right now is running a hard money lending company, and I'm writing a book about how to be a private lender. And I'm talking from A to Z, from when the application comes in from your client that wants to borrow it, all the way through underwriting and servicing the note and everything else. I want to give that away to your group. The book is not published yet. I'm literally writing it right now. So it'll be out tail end of the year, but you can see my email address there. Just shoot me an email, say, hey, I saw you on Note Camp. I'd love to get the book when it's available. I'll send you the free e-version when it's out. And my phone number's on there. Raising money, lending money, whatever, feel free to reach out. And the last thing that we do is an annual conference. And this is advanced strategies. This is the stuff we were talking about today, and then a lot of other stuff as well. But the next one I'm having, it's in February 2023 in Cancun at the Hyatt Ziva. We do things a little different, everybody. So I am going to have non-selling speakers presenting from 9 until 1 each day, 5-day conference, Monday through Friday. The afternoon is open networking. Get your beach time, get your pool time, get your drink on, whatever you want, but you're spending time networking and growing your relationships with others. And then we have these town hall sessions in the evening, which are more interactive, Q&A, case studies, whatever. But the reason it's called Generations of Wealth, the part I'm super proud of, is we encourage you to bring your kids. We encourage kids, especially 10 and older, to sit in on the sessions. There's no charge for you to bring your kids. I mean, other than what you got to pay to have them at the resort. But as far as the conference, there's no charge. And it's really something that I'm passionate about. My family, my kids, building a network in their teenage years that we didn't even think about building until we were in our 30s and 40s, and some of us in our 50s and 60s. So not a hard sales pitch. You can see the website, gowvoyage.com. Right now it's like $1,000 a ticket, plus your, whatever your resort choice is. We've got, different style rooms at the resort. But so not a hard sales pitch. I will tell you, Scott, and you and I had this conversation offline. When you run a conference, you guys can see the logo has a cruise ship. This used to be and was designed to be on a cruise. Way less stress running a conference on a cruise. And so financial obligations, contracts, all this stuff. I did not book a huge room block at this conference because I'm on the hook if I don't fill it.
Yeah.
So this is not a sales pitch to be hurry up and do it now because blah, blah, blah. Seriously, I can't guarantee any additional rooms after my block is full. They may give me more. I don't know what the pricing will be at that point. I know if I hit my room block, I know when I hit my room block, we've got a great number of people for the conference. And if it goes more than that, cool. If not, we're going to have a great conference. So Anybody that's listening to this, if you'd like to be a part of it, there's the website. If not, Scott, it's been awesome. I really appreciate you having me as a speaker.
No problem, Derek. We're gonna have you on the podcast later on when the book comes out. We'll help you get promoted out there as well for everybody out there. So, yep, get contact information. I put that in the chat roll for you, everybody. GoWvoyage.com is the website. Check it out, guys. February 26th to March 4th. That's awesome. It's still cold in most places. I mean, the ground's still frozen in Wisconsin for the most part.
There's a reason we go that time of year, no doubt.
Exactly. Well, good stuff. Derek, thank you so much for speaking on Note Camp. We really appreciate it. Love the case studies. We're going to definitely have to have you back on and dive some more stuff. And I got my guy in Wisconsin now because I get stuff in Wisconsin. I'm not really excited about buying the debt and a lot of stuff, but there's some deals on there. We could partner up with some stuff for sure. And I'll be reaching out to you on that stuff. So
sounds good, man. I appreciate it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Derek. Have a great rest of your weekend, bud. Enjoy and have fun teaching your kids Pee-wee.
Yeah. Oh, that'll make you start drinking. I'll promise you that. But it's still fun. It's still fun.
Good stuff, man. Well, thanks, man. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Thank you.
Thanks.